Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome back to Next.js series once again, but this time I want to get into shadcn a bit because we will be seeing a lot of videos where we'll be building projects, and some of the projects will be very exciting with a lot of use cases, real life use cases you might want to build and deploy at production. To build those use cases, to build those UI, I find shadcn is a great approach to have. So in this video, our focus will be on shadcn, understanding the architecture, how to install it, what's behind it, how to get the component, and at the end of it, let's build something which will be useful as well. Alright, so without any further delay, let us get started. But again, a request, if you like this video, please post a like. Also, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Let us get started. For many of you who may be just starting with shadcn, a quick overview of it. So shadcn is your component library, and unlike many other component library where you install the library locally using yarn, npm, bun or pnpm command, here the philosophy is about copy pasting the component that you need from a source to your source repository or locally, and then start doing anything and everything that you would like to do. Just to take an example, if you need a button, you don't really use the button from somewhere, a remote library, or you don't install the button locally. Rather, you copy the button code from shadcn locally to your project and put the styling, the required stuff on top of it as you need, and then work is done means you push that code into your remote repository and deploy it at production. But why? Why do you need such architecture? Why do you need such approach for solving the problem? Before you understand the architecture of it and the why part, let's take a quick overview of shadcn and its website. So if you come to ui.shadcn.com, you will land here. I would really encourage you to go to this components page where you will be able to see all the components that shadcn provide out of the box. Clicking on any of these components, you would be able to see a representation of that at the right side, and also you can get into the code to understand how this particular component can be used and built. So this is a cool stuff. Along with that, you also get to see that if you need that component, how do you install that component into your source code? But hang on, just now I told that there is no installation. There is nothing that you install as an npm, right? Exactly, you don't do it. What you do, you have a command and through which you get the code of that particular component into your source repository locally. So this command like npx shadcn-ui at latest add, and then the component name, maybe a breadcrumb or a badge or a button or a table or a form, is going to get you the respective component's source code into your source repository so that you can start using that, building your UI, composing thing incrementally. And after that, the next page that you want to look out for is called themes. So you can change the theme really fast and really well with shadcn. By default, when you install shadcn, which you'll see in a while, you can select the theme to get started. After that, also if you want to change the theme, you can change the theme at any point in time. I'll also show that how can you do it very quickly. And then the themeability, like you have this dark theme and from there you want to go to light theme, you want to come back to the dark theme. Getting all this placed into the system is pretty easy as well. So spend some time guys on this shadcn UI website, get accustomed to the things that are there around. The docs that if you go, it is not that heavy, it's kind of lightweight. The docs that you might want to get into is about the respective components, the one that you would like to use. All right, so let's get into the architecture. That is where you are going to appreciate shadcn a lot. So what is shadcn architecture? The image that you see on your screen, I can actually imagine shadcn architecture like this. So when you build UI, what do you need? When you build the user interfaces, you need components. You need components, you need working components. You need working components which are accessible too, because accessibility is a primary factor when you go to production and give your user interfaces to your users. Some of them might not want to use mouse, they want to do keyboard navigation. They want their UI to be read by the screen readers. There might be different kind of clause and practices around 508 testing, around accessibility present there that you need to adhere to when you build your UI. Now, when you build any custom component, adhering to all these rules by yourself is pretty difficult. And it's not only that, when a customer is coming in and facing an issue and pointing it out that there is an accessibility issue that you need to fix, fixing that might take much more time than fixing a functional issue. So, you would like to get something which already have things incorporated in it, right? Maybe a basic component, basic button, basic combo box, basic list box, basic table, basic form, which has already working functionality along with all these accessibility factors plugged into it. What you don't have in those components are you don't have any kind of style or any kind of opinionated style applied on it. Because it's your application, you want to make the look and feel and the styling the way that you would like to. That's why this architecture comes very handy. The first box that you see over here is called the bare metal box. It means that it has the bare minimum thing for you to get started. So for example, a button, your HTML itself is having a button element. With that you can create a button. It has a table element. With that you can create a table, things like that. It has a form element, you can create a form, right? Now, if you need certain advanced functionality, for example, if you need an advanced form, you have something called React hook form, which is great in functionality and at the same time it is headless. It means that it provides you the functionality, but on top of that you can actually give the toppings of any kind of styling that you would like to. Similarly, if you know about the Radix UI, it gives you a bunch of components out of the box. And then you take those components, those are all accessible components. You can sprinkle again the amount of styling that you're looking for on top of that, and you get a fully styled, fully accessible, fully functional components built on top of Radix UI. Like that, there are components which are like tables, headless UI component. There are things like dropdown, all these things are available. So shadcn, what they have done is basically they have taken this bare metals component, whether those are UI components from any of those libraries like React Hook Form or maybe the Transact table, things like that, or the browser components itself. On top of that, they made sure that those components which are coming in, those are functional and those are accessible. And on top of that, they have given you the toppings of your style layer. I have created a video sometime back where I have explained the CN to you. The CN function, what exactly the CN function. If you have missed that video, I would like to request you to watch that video so that you understand CN very deeply. It's a short video and then you come back to this so that you understand rest of the philosophy very well as well. The link to that video is in the description of this video. Please check it out. So what happened on this toppings layer basically, shadcn has got Tailwind CSS, which is a great tool, provides utility based classes. It has CN. I told you to check out CN because that's going to give us a lot of power when conflicting styles come into picture along with the conditional styling coming into picture. So check that out, CN. Then the variants, CVA, I'm going to talk about it when I'm going to code with shadcn a bit, and the global CSS, the power of it for doing the theming and all other stuff that is also we are going to see in a while. Now, if we combine these two, that's when we get the shadcn UI components. So for example, the right side, the form that you are seeing, it could be that the underlying is a form from React Hook form. And on top of that, it has all the flexibility to come up with some basic styles. And you have an opportunity to post your style, theme this component the way you want, or impose the kind of design tokens or the design systems that you have on top of this component to make it look like it is personalized and customized to your need. So this is the architecture. Keeping this particular architecture in mind, let us get into what we are going to build using shadcn and Next.js, a bare minimum thing we are going to build. But while doing that, we will definitely introduce you to a few components and how to style them as well. I thought it would be great to build a subscription form. There are a few reasons to it. Let me tell you. One is like this is a form where I will be able to show you or introduce you to a few shadcn component. For example, there is a form that you get to see over here. And then once you fill up the form, let's assume the person who subscribed, that subscribed person details you're going to see in a card at the right side. So there's a card component as well. Along with that, once you fill up the form and submit, you also get a toaster somewhere at the bottom, right? A toast message. And then you also have a theming portion over here where you can go to a light theme, you can go to a dark theme, or you can go to the system theme. So I thought it would be great to introduce you to all this section component with Next.js. And guess what? If we are able to do this, the subsequent video is going to integrate this particular UI along with Next.js server action to show how to really do this kind of subscribe form and send an email to the person who is subscribing to. So that will be really cool, right? Take this particular form, take this particular UI and integrate with Next.js server action, integrate with the email operation and do something cool in the next video. But in this video, the whole focus is shadcn, whole focus is integrating shadcn component with Next.js and get to build something like what you see on the screen. Let's get started with code. To get started with Next.js application, the easiest option is to go to nextjs.org and then copy this command from their website, go to your terminal and then paste that particular command. Make sure you have Node.js installed and then follow. Yes, I want to proceed. Project name, subscribe form. We're going to use JavaScript. Yes, yes, no, yes, no. That's it. Now the installation is done. I'll go inside the subscribe form folder and do yarn dev because I'm using yarn. If you're using npm or pnpm or bun, you can use the command accordingly. It's running on localhost 3000. So let me go to localhost 3000. I can see the basic app and its UI coming up, which you're going to change altogether. All right, so let's get this project into VS Code. Great, I have the project open. Inside this project, I'm going to create a folder called components. And inside components, I'll be creating two components. One is called subscription form.jsx and another is called subscribers.jsx. Both the components are very simple at this point of time. The subscription form component just having a div now exporting the component. Subscribers also doing just div and exporting the component. Now I'm going to go to the page.js file, clean up almost everything that I see, and then I'll be importing the subscription form and we'll be importing the subscribers. And then let's create a div, and inside this div, let's put the subscription form component and the subscribers component. Let's put some classes around the div so that it's kind of aligned correctly, right? Now let's see the UI once. All right, we have this subscription form and the subscribers, this kind of gradient effect that also you can get rid of. Open the global.css file and remove everything other than those three Tailwind related directive imports at the top. Now if you go, great, it looks subscription form and subscribers. Now you're going to fill in the gap one by one. But first, let's focus on installing shadcn. To install shadcn on Next.js, come to the installation page of shadcn. You will find variety of options over there. The one that we are interested in is Next.js, so click on Next.js. Once you click on Next.js, the first part, creating the Next.js app is already done for us. So we'll start from here, npx shadcn UI latest init. So just copy this one, go to your command prompt again. Here you can select like what kind of package manager that you are using. I'm using yarn, so I'll be taking yarn. Coming to the command prompt, just paste this one and say init. So this is going to ask you for a few options like, what kind of style you would like to use. Is better to select and decide one before you execute this command because it's hard to change later point in time. I'll go with default, the default selection. The difference between default and New York is just about certain spacing and sizing of each of these elements and fonts, nothing beyond that. That's it. You can select any of this color, base color like slate, gray, zinc, anything. I'll go with slate as it is. And then it's asked, would you like to use CSS variables for colors? If you say yes, then the CSS variable scheme you will be using for theming the application, all the theming variables and all. Otherwise, you'll be using Tailwind CSS utility classes. So for theming, I'll go with CSS variables. So I'll retain yes. It will create a components.json file, which you're going to see right now, and initialize the projects and its dependencies. Let's go ahead, keen to see like that what it has created. A bunch of things got created over here. Let's see them one by one. So whenever you're installing shadcn, it will look for a folder called components. If it is not there, it will create. For our case, we had already created this components folder. And inside this components folder, we will see that different kind of UI component are going to come and sit as and when we want to get their source code. It will create a special folder called lib, and inside that there will be a utils.js file, and inside that you will find that special function called cn function. This is the cn function we exactly created by ourselves without using shadcn in the previous video, the cn video that I was referring to a while back. So please go ahead and check that out to understand what exactly cn mean here. Now you have the CN, you have these things. Along with this, there is a global.css file where a bunch of things got added at the layer base and for the dark as well for theming purpose. So if we want to theme this one differently in a later point in time, like we want it in orange, red, green, we'll be changing things over here and we'll see that in this video as well. And the final thing that it has created over here is called components. In this component, this is kind of a configuration file based on the input that we have provided. All these things have come over here. So for example, the base color we had select slate, CSS variables we wanted to go ahead with for the theming. So it's true, style is default, and all these things are over here. The components are going to go into add components folder. The utils will be in the /lib/utils that we have seen. Apart from that, if you go to package.json file, you will be able to see a few things got installed as well, like CLSX, the CVA, class variant authority, all these things got, and the Lucid React, where a lot of icons we are going to use from this is got installed. And it also modified the tailwind.config.js file. Unless otherwise you are playing around with tailwind too much, you don't have to really bother about it. We are going to see this a little bit when we will know like how to customize a font or add a font through shadcn. That's the time probably we'll be coming and extending the fonts over here. We're going to see that as well. So these are the things that got installed with shadcn. Now let us go ahead and install few components. Now let us focus on the components. Now the button component is here. There is a preview of the button component. There is a code for button component and there is an installation. So let's follow the installation, the part that I was telling, that the moment you install, basically you don't get things like getting a binary or minified file. Rather, you get the actual source code that you can modify and make use of it the way that you want. So let's get started with button. Click on this with yarn from your terminal, paste it out and then enter. It's installing button and done. So if I go back to VS Code, now I would see there is a UI folder, and if I expand that, I would see a button. Now let me spend some time with this button.jsx as a very basic skeleton stuff so that rest of the components and their hierarchy, their usage, you understand pretty well. So if you look into this file, you notice a few things like CN, CVA and all these things. Now there is something called button variants, and inside that there are few styles and there is a variants object. Okay. Inside the variants object, there are bunch of variant that are declared. For example, how does a default look of the button? How is the destructive look of the button? How is outline? How is secondary? How is ghost? How it is as a link? Similarly, there are size which are also defined, like what is the default size, SM, LG, and all these places. Now they have also given the default variants as default as a variant and default as a size. That means this is the size of the button which is default if you don't pass anything, and this is the scheme of that particular button if you don't pass anything. Now if you go down, that's where things become more interesting. Over here you have a button, right? And over here you have the class name. This is where you see that you have this variant and size passed. If you don't pass variant and size, we have seen that the default variant and default size will be used. But if you pass, for example, a variant like secondary, the secondary variant will be there. If you pass a size like LG, a bigger button with a secondary style, it will be there. Apart from that, you can also pass your additional props. Now the best part over here is like how we are composing everything in this particular component. Do you see this CN? This is what it is doing, the utility function. This is where it can takes a bunch of styles that are coming from this button.jsx component or coming from outside from the consumer of this button.jsx component, and can really mix and match of them, combine them together. If there are any kind of conditional styling is there, taking care of everything together, and then output the neutralize, formalize style bunch or the class names to this particular component. And finally this component is alive. You also see this react.forward ref is because if you want to get the reference of the button anytime, for example you want to put the focus on it or autofocus on it or any kind of things that you want to do with the reference, you can do. That's the reason the forward ref is also there. So this is how the button component is. Now if I'm going to use this button component, for example, I can see its usage, right? So I can just copy this one, go to any of those component that I have created. For example, subscribers, I can just paste this import over here, and then I click on this particular usage which is having the outline variant, and instead of this subscribers, let me just put that outline variant. That's it, this button. Now if I go to UI, I'll be able to see this button over here. Now, if I want something in a different variant, it's just a matter of going to the button.jsx, pick up the variant that I want. For example, I want a destructive variant and I'm going to pass this destructive over here. And now if I go back, I would see this button in a destructive red color. What if a variant is not present? Now here is the power. You have the source code, not a minified file or things like that. So you can basically add your own custom and say bg green 500, and you can just pass this custom instead of any of these default variants. So now if I go to the UI, I'll be seeing a button which is of green color, right? So this is how the customization is possible for each of the things based on what you need in your project. So we're done with the button. Now the next thing is we are going to install a few more components that we need for our subscription form. So for that, let's go ahead and install them. As we have installed button, similarly, for example, I can install card, I can install form. You can install multiple things at once by giving a space. I want to install input element because inside form I want to use the input element, and then I want to install drop down. So it says that it is done with all of them. Let's go ahead and check it out. Yeah, I see there is a input. Along with input there is a label as well. There is a form, there is a card, there is a button, but there is no drop down. So it means that we have misspelled this one or mistyped that one. So I'll go back. This is where the fun is. I'll go to drop down, and if I see the installation is called drop down menu, not drop down. So I'm going to copy that over again, and this time I'm going to put a drop down menu. It's installed. Great. I get to see a drop down menu as well. I'm done with all the UI components that I need to build the subscription form now. It is just about taking the source code, and if you want to modify any of them, the way that we modified the button, just go inside that and keep modifying the stuff based on your need. So let's get into subscription form, the component that we have created in the beginning, right? This particular component where we will be building a subscription form, the left side one, with lot of validations, lot of stuff. And that's how, if you don't know React hook form yet or you haven't used it, this is your opportunity to learn the power of React hook form as well, because that's the base of the form that we'll be creating and we'll be using over here. All right, so let's do that. The form component we have installed from shadcn is basically a React hook form, right? And let us follow the documentation again to get this form up and running for our sign up form component, right? And you will see it like how composed and how clean it is to create and make use of it. So I'm in the docs again, and I have selected form from the left side navigation components. And here this command is already done. I have installed. So I'm going to use the form. The first thing that is going to talk about is like this form internally use Zod and the Zod resolver. What is Zod? The Zod is a library and a utility that actually helps you with lot of type safety. So you basically define the schema of a particular element or a component in your UI, and you adhere to the conditions and the validations of that schema throughout the application. So for example, you can have a password and you can say that the maximum length of the password can be 13, minimum should be 8, there should be a capital letter, and all these conditions you can give. You can also do something like an email, and you can put it like, email must have at least one character and there should be a construct of an email, right? So all this kind of schema you can actually create using Zod. And then once you define this schema for your form, after that you will be passing that particular thing over here. You have this form schema, right, to something called Zod resolver. This is the Zod resolver. Now once you have this Zod resolver getting this schema in your hand, then you integrate that Zod resolver along with your React hook form, the form that we got through shadcn, so that the form is aware of all these conditions, all these validations that we have just now configured. Let's do and talk, then just showing it off. I'm going to follow this one again. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this use client to this Zod over here and copy pasting this one, all this import, going to the subscription form component and just pasting them over here at the top. Now I'll go back to the documentation once more. It's use some kind of form schema, and here the schema defined for username, and the username must be at least 2 characters. For us, we'll be using email address and name, both the things. So for us, we will have full name and the email as the fields in our form schema. So let's define our form schema. So our form schema will be something like this. We have z.object, and we will have full name and email as our field. So these are the schema object where we are saying that full name must have 3 characters. So we are saying name must have at least 3 characters, and email is basically with the email function we are saying the email has to be valid. Now Zord is having this capability of validating that you are actually putting a correct email address or not. That's the beauty of it. As we have the form schema, we now pass the form schema into a Zord resolver and get the resolver out, and then we are initializing the form using a hook called use form. So this use form hook we have already imported from React hook form, and this one we'll be using to get the form out. So let's define the form for ourselves. Exactly the same thing we are going to take from here, but except username we will have full name and email because those are the fields that we are dealing with. So let's go to our code. So similarly we have our form now, which is like use form is taking this configuration object. One is a resolver. The resolver is a Zord resolver where we are passing this form schema, and then the default values we are defining for the full name and email, those are we making blank. So when the form comes up, those fields won't have any values because we are giving all the things blank. If we had to do in a way that a default value has to be passed to the subscription form, so that when the form loads, the fields will be loaded with some default value, those we can pass through props over here and can read it and could have passed over here. But right now that requirement is not there. Let's move on to the documentation again. After this, we have to define something called a submit handler. It means when the form is submitted using the submit button that we'll see in a while, the value that we need to grab so that we can do something with the value. The value will come from the form field. Our form field are the full name and the email address. So when someone give a full name or email address and hit the submit button, this will be captured inside these values. So let's go ahead and define the submit handler for us exactly the same way. So this is our submit handler function on submit values, and we are just doing console.log values. We'll do other stuff little later. Again, documentation. Now is the time to build the form, the actual form. And let's understand this one a bit, and then we'll talk about what is this form about and how are you going to modify this. Now take a look here. This form, what is this form? This form is the one that we have already created at the top. This is the one, right? Defining your form. So this is the form that we have to pass to the form. Okay. Then our actual HTML form come into picture, which takes an on submit HTML thing. Here we are calling form.handleSubmit and passing this on submit function. What is this on submit function? We have created just now this on submit function. So we are passing this on submit function to this handle submit so that we are registering our on submit to this. After that, it is just about defining the form field. Form field means each of the field. We have two fields. One is full name, one is email. So we'll have two form field. Here this example is having only one field. So there is only one form field. What is this form field? The name is username, and what it will render. What is the UI output that you are going to see? We are going to see a label called username. We are going to see an input called input text, and there is a description which gives some kind of hint about the input text. These are the things that are optional. You may or may not want to use it. And this is something called form message. If there is a validation message comes in, where to show. That is why you put this particular form message, and everything you put inside this form item. So this render part takes care of the fact that what you are going to render as a UI element inside the form. And as you see, another thing called control, the form.control, this is the one that you have to pass, because otherwise the React hook form is not going to put any kind of control on your input. That's why this input is already embedded inside this form control, and this form control is basically referenced with this particular control attribute. Okay, now if you know how to define this part for a full name, the email will be just a copy paste of it. The only thing that we are going to change will be the name is email, and then input type will be email. The rest of the things are going to be as it is, and we may not use this form description part for our case because we don't want to give any kind of hint. And at the end of it, there is a button which is a submit button. Now this form, then the form item, form field, button, everything should be imported, right? That's the reason there are a bunch of imports at the top. So we are going to copy this imports first, where we're importing everything from the components UI form, which is like shadcn form, internally React hook form. And then we have this import input, and we have this import button. Everything is coming from shadcn. So only the component we need, we are just picking and using. So let's go to our VS Code and let's go to the top and put those imports over here. So we have imported everything. Now again go to doc, copy paste this form to form exactly, come back to VS Code, remove this div completely, put that, and that's it. You have a very basic form. Now at this time, if I go to UI, see I have a form. Now our schema do not have username. We have something called full name and email. So let's take full name for the first time. Let's do full name over here. This also will say full name. The placeholder we can say enter name, and description we don't need it all, so we'll get rid of it. And I think that's it. Now let us create another form field. So from here, this form field, I'm going to copy this from here to here and going to create one more. And here I'm going to call it out as email. Here I'll be saying this is as email, and here I'll say enter email. Now it's time to test it out. So we have both the name, we have both the fields, full name and email. Let's not type anything. Let's press submit button. Do you see? The validation and the showing of validation is quite inbuilt. This is coming from the Zod where we have written it and passed it to the Zod resolver. The name must be of 3 characters. Let's type 1, 2, 3. It's gone. Now invalid email address, of course, it is blank. So let's give an email address. And now let's click on submit button. Take a look into the console at the right side. Once we press submit, I see these values where the full name as AAA that I have typed, email is tapas@email.com. That's what I have typed. So this particular form is actually working fully functional, right? And at this side, we can put some style and all to make it much more beautiful. That's a different thing, but this is working. Let's quickly put some style to it so that it actually looks much better than what it is right now. So this one, I'll be adding few more styles. Okay, added some margin, making it flex. And then when we go to our each of this input field, let's add a class name over here. Here for the email field, let's add input type is as email so that it has its default validations, also the browser level validations as well, and the same class name. I think the UI looks much better at this point of time. All right, so this is done. Now next we are going to see some more validation aspects. So for example, I don't want this particular button to be enabled, though it is giving validations. I don't want this to be enabled unless all these validations are passed. How can I do that? Very easily we can do with this particular component. If you remember, I have something called form here, isn't it? So after getting all this stuff, what I can do here, I can get a couple of things from this form. One is a state call is submitting and is valid that I get from form.form state. Okay. Now I have is submitting and is valid. Using this, I can do multiple things. For example, when the form is getting submitted, let's say form is making an asynchronous call. In the next video, we will see when users submit the form, we are going to send an email from the server action. So that's the action going to take certain time. In that time, you don't want anybody to type anything in your input box. So what you can do, you can come here and say disabled equals to is submitting. The same thing you can do with the email box as well. Disable is submitting. And you can also do the same thing with the button. So you can go to button and write a condition like, hey button, disable it if it is not valid or it is submitting, right? So now I go to the UI, you see this submit button is already disabled. Now until otherwise I satisfy both the condition, like this is like 3 characters and I give the email correctly over here unless I do each of this thing, this is not going to be enabled. Now it is enabled. Now I can submit. Now it will print it into the console. So this is how the form works. So button and form, these two things you have already seen. Now the next thing that I'm going to show you is about the usage of card. And that's what I'm going to do it over here. That's very simple. So let's go ahead and get done. The card component is even more simpler. So for that, I have already installed card, and you know that I have to import the card like this. So I'm going to copy this in the subscribers.jsx, going to remove this button that we used some time back and import all these card related imports, and then just copy this over, which is having a card component like the one that we're seeing already over here. It has a card header. Inside header, you can have title and description. Then you have the card content and you have a footer. You can put anything inside this content that you want, any other UI component. So I'm copying this, and inside this div, I'm just going to paste it out. Now I can change some of this text. Maybe I can say subscription added. Please check your email. Wow, some person has subscribed, and the date and time when the person was subscribed, unformatted at this point in time. Later we can format, not a problem. So if I go to UI, I'm seeing this particular card as well. So this is coming up. This is great. Now, the next thing that we want to quickly do is about theming. Let's do the theming part quickly. For theming, again in the documentation, that's the beauty of it. Everything is in the documentation. And I like to kind of teach following the documentation because it's the source of the truth. Click on this theming option and you have everything over here that we need to configure for the theming stuff. All right. So from here, we have to go to this dark mode. Then again, click on the Next.js. Through some component, I believe the next-themes have already come. I'm just going to verify that. Yes, I can see next-themes. So next-themes is already here. I don't have to install that. Now I have to create something called a theme-provider.jsx file. Okay. Under components, it's saying under components. So I'll go to the source code. Under components, new file, themes provider.jsx. Let's copy this one first, paste it over here. As we are using JavaScript, we don't need to import this type. We don't need this guy as well. Next, we need to import this theme provider, the one that we just now created. So I'm going to copy this one and import this one into the layout, our layout. So I'm going to copy inside app, go to the layout, and then you import it at the top. Then we have to use this theme provider to wrap our page component inside the layout. So let's copy this guy from here to here. And in the body, you have this body class name, right? Just break this one a bit, put the theme provider around this children and close the theme provider here. And we will keep this one inside a main. So that structurally it is correct. We need a theme switcher as well, right? So for that, we'll go to the documentation again. And here we have the toggle mode, toggle switcher. You see this one? This is the toggle, light, dark, and system, something like this. And the code for this one is already present. So what we can do, we can take this one and create a navbar. And inside the navbar, we can pull this particular component and just can keep it, right? So let's create a navbar once quick. Inside components again, new file, navbar.jsx. This is a very simple navbar, and I'm going to use this navbar is just having a h1. That's it. Subscribe to tapaScript. That's it. I'm going to go to layout, import the navbar over here, and then use this navbar just above the children, the page basically. That's it. We have the navbar. We'll check the UI once quickly. Yes. This is good, subscribe to tapaScript, but we don't have any kind of switcher now, right? So let's create a theme switcher. Again, under components, a new file, themeswitcher.jsx, and we are going to go to the documentation again. We're just going to copy everything from here, go to this new file, theme switcher, paste it, and quickly check what is it doing. It is having a drop down. Inside the drop down, there are three options basically. One is like light, dark, and system. For light, it is setting it to light. For dark, it is setting it to dark. For system, it is setting it to system. The set theme is basically coming from use theme, and use theme is coming from next themes, which is already installed for us, right? So now going to our navbar, we will be using this one by import mood toggle from theme switcher and use this mood toggle over here. That's it. Now let's go to UI. I see it in light mode and I see this one over here. Click on it, light, dark, system. Click on dark, it's in dark mode. Click on light again, it's in light mode. Excellent. Okay, so theming is also done. Next thing we're going to see is like if we want to change the color scheme of our app. Right now the color scheme is grayish. We might want to put something orangish, or we might want to put red or greenish. Like how do we do that? It's pretty straightforward. You go to shadcn and over here click on these themes. Here you have handpicked themes for yourself. You can pick up any theme that you want, any of this color, or you can customize this one the way that you want. You can select any of this from here and then customize it back, right? So let's pick up something, maybe this green one. And if I do this green one, after that, click on this copy code. If you take this copy code, you have this layer base, root and dark. Just copy this one. After that, you come to your code base, open the global.css file. The similar kind of code you will be seeing here, okay, from here, that at layer base, root and all. Just go ahead and remove all this only till here. like the portion that you have copied, and instead of that, you put the one that you have copied. Now go back to UI. I have taken the green theme. Do you see this? It's already turned to green. If I mouse over on this, it's in green color. If I go to dark mode, you see this one, all the green theme. Great, no? It is so fast and so easy for you. On top of that, also, if you want to customize and change anything, you can do that in the shadcn website itself, and again copy paste the thing, and your work is done. The last thing that we're going to see now is about the font configuration. That also going to be very straightforward. Let's take a look. Now this part alone, instead of applying this into the code, I'm just going to run it through once quick because it's pretty easy and you can do it by yourself. So if you want to get any kind of font, you have to first get that font imported into the root layout, like how it has imported Inter. For us, Inter is already there. But if you want to import any other font, the idea is exactly same. Here it has imported Inter as font sans, and over here it is getting the subset as Latin and created a variable called font sans, which we'll be using very soon. Okay. Now coming over here in the body, it is using this particular thing like a class name with the cn means it will multiplex all the class names together. Font sans dot variables, font sans is coming from over here and the variable is basically this one. Okay, now going back to the tailwind config.js file, this is where all other magic happening. We are importing this font family from the tailwind css itself, and here extending this theme with the font family, and this is where we are giving like sans, and you see this var font sans and the font family dot sans. So you are basically destructuring and adding one more. That's it. This is how you will be importing one font, you will be using one font. So this is what I wanted to kind of touch base in this particular video, which makes you comfortable using shadcn with Next.js or without Next.js, and know like how to kind of do some customization, get certain component done. One kind of semi-complex component like form we have dealt with in this video. There are few more other components which are extremely easy, like badge you should try out, and there are few more components which are little difficult like the data table. Those are the things that you need to play around, but don't worry if you don't want to do it alone, because in the subsequent videos where we build things, I bet that we'll be using probably 90% of those components in all those applications. So in our next video, I am going to take this one forward and going to integrate this one with a server action, going to use a service for sending actual email, and then store this data into MongoDB. And once user subscribe, the data gets stored into MongoDB. The user subscription data gets populated from here from the MongoDB at the real time. So we'll be seeing certain things from the cache validation as well. And then we'll be generating an email so that the email goes to the person who is actually subscribing and gets notified with actual email action. Are you for it? If so, don't forget to subscribe to this channel because you are going to learn some awesome thing from tapaScript. Have a great day. Keep learning.